Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Flinchbaugh, author of People Solve Problems and host of the podcast by the same name. And here we are with episode 1 with my good friend Andy Carlino. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. It's always good to see your face.
Always good to see you. So, yeah, so Andy, just for an introduction, he's a trusted advisor to senior leadership of some of the largest global organizations and in all sectors of industry. Co-founder and managing partner of the Lean Learning Center, co-authored The Hitchhiker's Guide to Lean: Lessons from the Road, and contributing author of the SME Lean Handbook for Lean Certification. So, a bio I know pretty well since we share a lot of the same things. I'll add, a friend, a brother, a mentor, a partner, many things. And we spent a lot of time teaching and coaching and consulting together. But a lot of that, was 8 years old. So, we've caught up a lot of times, but we don't talk shop a lot. So I'll be interested to see, kind of how your thinking's evolved, as mine continues to as well as we talk about problem solving. So thanks for coming on episode 1. I thought it was the only appropriate way to kick this off.
Thanks for asking me. I'm really pleased that you did ask.
We've created a lot of content together, classes and books, and so just what's one little podcast between friends.
Anything I can partner with you on, I don't care how little it is. I'm always there, man.
That's good for me. So you've helped a lot of people build their problem solving capabilities. And again, we've both evolved our thinking as since we used to teach together many times. But why don't you just start, walking me through how you think about a problem solving process from sort of beginning to end? What's your structure? What's your thought? What's your pathway?
And if you don't mind, I'm going to get a little bit into the structure a little bit later. I know this is not a lengthy podcast, but a little bit later in the podcast. But I want to reinforce a couple of things. One is that I think if you actually investigated or looked at every lean tool there is, it's either going to surface and or solve a problem. And I don't think you can find a tool that doesn't do one or the other or both.
Mm-hmm.
What that says is that's how important problem solving is. It's just critically important. In fact, I think today that rapid, effective problem solving is a significant competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. Forget a lot of this stuff, but if you can rapidly and effectively solve a problem, surface and solve a problem, you're going to be ahead of whatever the competition is, because everybody's got problems.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no organization without problems. So this is why I think your book is so important, because it's focused on that single most important thing that lean addresses and the significant competitive advantage that problem solving provides. But like in the book, you delved into the behavioral thinking side of problem solving and the structural part of problem solving. And I think there's barriers to both of those. And when we get to the structural, I'll talk a little bit about approach. But I did want to talk about the barriers to both behavioral and structural. I think the most you and I have talked about this, the biggest behavioral barrier is we don't embrace problems as opportunities. We're embarrassed by them. No, don't tell me about them. I don't want to see them. Don't surface them. That's obviously thinking. That's just part of a culture of an organization, right, one way or the other, right? Good or bad. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier that starts from the thinking perspective, but it goes a little deeper. And we've talked about many times, like how people use stories and opinions and assumptions, and then we run with that. Mm-hmm. Well, in problem solving, the same thing. There's opinions and assumptions and stories that are used, and we take them as fact, all right, and then we react to that. And you and I have talked about direct observation since we worked together, basically. Right. But here's the challenge and here's the caution, and this is what I'm learning, is that even though when there's a story, an opinion, or just an assumption, and you say, look, and you challenge it, what happens is the individuals go out and they find the information that confirms what their idea was anyway, right, the confirmation bias.
Right.
So I've found often that I've almost got to double my efforts when people tell their stories or make their assumptions or whatever it is, and we ask them, we challenge them to find the facts, and almost all the time, it's not quite the facts. It's what they have found, like I said, to confirm whatever idea they already may have. So this confirmation bias has become, I think, an issue in problem solving.
Well, and I think probably a lot of contributors to that, including the fact that, research is so easy, right? Is that, so if you can't find easily contradictory stuff, you can dig a little further, and because you can just, Google's your friend, right? Find something that confirms your bias. And I think I just said to someone today, it was an assumption that I thought I had that I just wanted to check, and it turns out I was right. But I was like, I was saying, I've held this assumption for probably 20 years, but it's irrelevant how long you've held the assumption on how true it is, right? So it's just how long you didn't test it and challenge.
It's just old.
It's just an old assumption, right? That you haven't gone back to challenge. So I think that's a really important bias and perspective, because we think problem solving is finding truth, right? And maybe right, if we don't overcome
maybe is the right word. Yeah, finding the truth is not the easiest thing to do. And we think the first go around we found it. Yeah, but you got to push and push, or else you end up in this kind of confirmation bias position after the stories and opinions and assumptions. So that's probably one of the single biggest barriers beyond the most obvious. Another is, as you know, and this is a thinking part, is workarounds, right? Just saying we're not going to stop. Right, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep working around the problem without, I don't really consciously even recognize most of the time they're working around the problem. And I understand fully that, hey, sometimes you have no choice. You're gonna work around it. You're not gonna always stop, but you should always think about stopping, because if you think about stopping, then at least you'll surface whatever the problem is, rather than just work around it and it just comes back again the next time. Right. So I've told a lot of clients, look, I know. For me to say stop is completely foreign to you. But for me to say, when you think you should stop, at least expose the problem, shouldn't be foreign to you. That should be part of just what the culture is all about, right? Yep. Workarounds are evil.
And I think this is one of those things that organizations have gotten worse at through the pandemic, because they're like, just put your head down and power through, right? But we don't flip a light switch and we're through supply chain disruptions and inflation and staffing shortages. It's not like this hard stop. So it's really like we've developed this habit, and organizations aren't checking themselves going, yeah, maybe we should return to pulling our head up and not working around problems. But, again, that pandemic response is put your head down and plow through. And I think some bad habits formed as a result.
Yeah, and as you know, I have in the past, and I'm currently working with yacht builders. So yacht's just a big floating mansion. That's all it is. Right. It's a big construction project, right? And you'll never see as many workarounds as you will in building a yacht, because I can't do this. I don't have this particular material, or this step has to come before that, and that isn't ready. So they work around all this stuff. It's like building your home and you put the drywall up and say, whoops, I got to go back now and put the plumbing in.
Yeah, I think that happened when my house was first built. So yeah.
I had drywall, but I don't have the plumbing, so I'll put the drywall.
Right.
So when working with these yacht builders, one of the things I said, look, it's an extremely complex process. Ridiculously complex. So to try to say we're going to go into process improvement and break it up, it would be nuts. So all I said to them was, look at the handoffs. Just look at every handoff as a problem, because it's either going to cause you a delay or you're going to make a mistake. So let's just start there. And if we can eliminate the handoffs, or at least error-proof the handoff, all right, we're 100% ahead, right? Without having to go through all of the, let's do 1,000 process maps and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's been effective in dealing with a little bit of the workaround stuff. The other thinking, I think, is that we reward the big problem. I've told you this, this. In my career before consulting, I grew pretty fast up through the career because I solved problems, right? I was a problem solver. Now, I don't say I was an effective problem solver, but I was a problem solver. So I got rewarded for that. I moved up the ladder, like promotions, got all this stuff. But these are big problems, and not everybody can solve big problems. So what do? We don't value the small ones. We don't value the little ones. Nor do we, and we'll get into this in a minute, have the capability of even dealing sometimes with those small ones, servicing those small ones. So I think part of that thinking behind problem solving is, you don't need this complex, really enormous problem, and that's the only time you're going to focus on problem solving. No, value the smalls. And one small can make a huge gain.
Yeah.
A lot of smalls can make a really huge gain. So that is a huge issue, I think. And then lastly, from a thinking perspective is, and this is why we've done this direct observation for all these years, is don't wait for a negative consequence. Don't wait for something bad to happen. And now you're problem solving.
Yep.
Go out and look for the problems. Go out and look for where there's a gap between what is occurring and what you expect. And then do your problem solving there. Yeah, nothing negative happened. There was no negative consequence. Nobody got hurt. No customer's angry, right? But there's a problem there. Yep. Fix that, and the likelihood is you're not going to have that bigger problem down the road. And most companies that I know do not actually go out and physically look for problems. They just wait for them to come to them.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of organizations are talking about resilience, right? Supply chain resilience and things like that, popular word right now. But, resilience is exactly that. It's solving problems before they have an impact, not waiting for them to have an impact and then reacting, right? So I think, people don't recognize that connection. So they're talking about resilience. They're not actually doing the right behavior. I think the other thing, going back to some of your other points around starting before problems become, a real problem, is it's a lot less emotion involved. So even the things like that confirmation bias, it's like, well, nobody's to blame because we don't have a bad outcome. So maybe I can relax a little and challenge my assumptions. So
right.
I think a lot of some of the bad behaviors get easier. They don't go away. They just get easier if we don't have the added burden of something bad having already occurred.
Right. So that's kind of behavioral barriers, if you would.
Yep.
But as we said earlier, there's structural barriers too. I mean, there's a process to solving problems, and there's barriers to that. And we've talked about how it's impossible, how it's difficult to anybody make a problem statement.
Right.
Okay? I just got 13 problem statements from 2 teams. One was good. Two were okay. The rest were horrible. Yeah. And they had been through some problem solving training.
Right.
People just do not know how to write a problem statement. So if you can't get that right, as you know, and you've got that in the book, I'm kind of repeating stuff a little bit, but if you can't get that right, then the rest of it's just foolhardy. If you do come up with a solution, it's just pure luck.
Yeah.
Right. It's just by chance that you made it. So, when you're writing a problem, people don't recognize that it's describe the problem and define the problem. What, where, and when. And here's the challenge I'm finding is the what is, if they even start describing it, the what is okay. The where is typically okay, but the when is often not in the problem statement. I mean, I could have a problem that only occurs at 9 o'clock in the morning on Thursdays. And if that's not in my problem statement, I'm going to have a real difficulty figuring out how I'm going to get to my solution. Right. So the what, where, and when, the when is almost always missed. I see that happen all the time. So problem statements require those 3 things, and the when is like I said. But part of the problem statement also is not just describing it, but defining it. What's the gap, right? And this is what, when I've been doing some problem solving training, is if you cannot measure the outcome after you've done working on this problem, then you didn't define it to start with. Right. It's as simple as that. So
and it could be a binary state. It could be a 1-0, right? This is either true or not true. But you can still confirm, right? 0 or 1, right? That's your measure. But otherwise, and sometimes people don't, they don't know how to measure it. They don't know how to evaluate it. They may not put in a permanent measure, but make that part of your work. Maybe you start working on the problem before your problem statement is, well measured, right? But that's part of the work then, is you got to figure that out, because otherwise you're just kind of going, do I feel better? As your way to conclude.
And problem statements should be fluid to some extent, right? As you learn more, right? As you investigate more, your problem statement is going to morph.
Yep.
Right. So thinking that once I've got my problem statement, that's it, is foolhardy.
Yeah.
Right. That's part of not being very good at writing a problem description.
Yep.
Another structural difficulty I find is that culturally we would like to have everybody be a problem solver. Right. Oh, I wish everybody should every day should solve problems. Well, that's stupid. That's unrealistic. If you think every single person can master complex problem solving, because they can't. It's, you know, and I know there's probably no more difficult skill to master than problem solving. It is really, really hard to do. So to expect everyone in the organization to be able to do that just makes no sense whatsoever. However, it does make sense that everybody should have a structure that helps make them a problem solver. Right? There's levels of problems, there's degrees of problems. You don't use the same process for every single problem. And if you have those degrees and those levels, you can drive problem solving all the way down to the lowest level of the organization.
Yep.
Right? Because you have a different structure to use for a different type of problem. So, you know, the first issue I always come up with is what is the impact and the ease of solving this particular problem? And if it's really difficult problem, then guess what? We're off doing the good old complex A3s. You know, there's 100 models of those things. If you Google it, God help you, you're going to find everything. But expect everybody to be able to master a complex A3, a comprehensive A3 for a complex problem, just makes no sense whatsoever. So by looking at both the impact and the ease, you say, well, this is complex. And we had only so many people that can facilitate through a complex problem. But then there's the simple problems where I kind of know what the problem is. I'm not sure what the root cause is, right? But I know I got to do a little bit of root cause analysis. I know I got to take a little deeper dive. Okay, so there's a simple A3, if you would. Takes out a lot of the stuff and just but gives them steps. Follow this step, that step, stick to the steps. So that brings in a whole nother group of people. And then you got the just do it's. Right. I know what the problem is. I know what's causing the problem. I know how to solve it. Right. The only issue with the just do it is make sure you document it.
Yeah.
So there's a structure for that as well. So when I think we talk about problem solving structure, we get too tied up into these comprehensive, complex problem solving models, when there's some very simple things that we could do, models that we could use at different levels of the organization that makes everybody a problem solver.
Right. And that's, you know, I think it has to relate to, you know, what information you even have available to you, right? Because if you're working on the front lines, you probably don't have a lot of market research available to you, right? It's not going to be, you know, why would you interact with that? It's not part of your role.
Right.
And so, and then the other side of that is what are the degrees of freedom of what levers you're allowed to pull, right? So if you're in the front line, you might not be allowed to go redesign the product, right? So don't go work on that, because that's probably outside your boundaries of empowerment. And so, you know, just like at the other end, doing strategic problem solving, right? Strategic A3s, massively complex, many different pathways, right? But well, who's going to be empowered to go change and shift the strategy? Well, not a whole lot of people. So why should they learn that skill, right? And it's sort of a false empowerment at that level. We're gonna teach you complex problem solving, but not give you access to perspective, data, or levers to go make solutions work to make that complex problem solving actually beneficial.
Right. So in the complex one, it's pretty often very cross-functional. As you get in a simple one, it's very functional. And if you just do it, it's very specific.
Yep.
Almost, you know. So again, it hasn't been my experience that companies really have those kind of structures in place. All right. And then define okay, if this happens, whatever matrix what they want to use for ease and impact, say, okay, this is pretty simple one. This is a very complex one. This is like, just go do it, right? Forget about it. Just get it done and document it, that kind of stuff. If you have that, now you can engage everyone. You can get everyone to be a problem solver. And then another barrier is, and I love in reading the book, and I kind of reread some of the stuff here before our little conversation, is you a couple times mentioned you don't have a real bias for the language, like current state versus future state versus ideal state, or I think it was solutions versus countermeasures. I don't remember them all, but I'm a huge ideal state fan. Mm-hmm. And I believe that by focusing on the ideal state, what you do is you will identify additional problems, because you'd already be at the ideal state. I mean, these companies aren't stupid.
Right.
They don't have they have the resources. They would be there if there wasn't something stopping them.
Right.
Right. So by exposing to an ideal state, what you do is you expose the barriers, and then you start, each one of those barriers, maybe more than one, is a problem. It gives you the future state, then another progressive future state, another progressive future state. So I really like a focus on ideal state. Now that it's a prejudice of mine, as you well know. And it's not hard. People think it's so difficult to do. No, it isn't. It's a bunch of bullet points. It's really easy to do. But when you do it, it exposes so much more opportunity to having these progressive future states, if you would.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's probably a good point for us to end on, just because, I'll say that ideal state thinking, challenges people to think better, think deeper about what good looks like. Right. And just as you said, exposes new problems, but also, I think, also adds some inspiration to what's possible. And that,
it's a good point.
Problem solving's hard, right? And sometimes we need a reason to go through it. And if there's something better on the other side, it might be just enough worth it to go through all that hard work problem solving. So yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts. You and I usually we would get to talk shop mostly when we were creating stuff, right? I think we were both very pragmatic. We didn't go create stuff just for the heck of it. So whether we're writing a book or designing a class or working on a client project, that served as our joint inspiration to create. So here we come together again for a podcast. So
I don't create stuff just for the heck of it. I'm just too lazy to do that.
It's a good enough reason too. So, well, I'm glad we could do some creation together. Thanks for joining me, and wish you all the best.
And always to you and the beautiful family, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the People Solve Problems podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. Visit jflinch.com for more episodes and other content. And continue to join us on your podcast app, of course. We greatly appreciate your feedback through reviews and ratings. Consider expanding your understanding of problem solving with Jamie's book, People Solve Problems: The Power of Every Person, Every Day, Every Problem. Available on Amazon. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and solving problems.